We have breaking news tonight from the New York Times about the New York Times and the panic that the New York Times has created within the Trump White House. The Times is reporting that the White House has discussed Senator Rand Paul's idea to use polygraph tests on senior officials of the Trump administration. Here is the Times report tonight. Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, an ally of Mr. Trump's, recommended that the president force members of his administration to take polygraph examinations. And there was, at least briefly, some discussion of that among advisors to the president. Another option mentioned by people close to Mr. Trump was asking senior officials to sign sworn affidavits that could be used in court if necessary. One outside advisor said the White House had a list of about 12 suspects. And joining us now by phone is New York Times chief White House correspondent Peter Baker, who is one of the reporters on this article. And Peter, this is an extensive look at what the New York Times has created, the crisis atmosphere it has created inside the Trump White House. What more have you learned about the possibility of using lie detector tests and the suspect list of 12?
Well, what I would say is it's not the New York Times that's created this crisis. I would say it's the administration official who's written an anonymous piece that the New York Times happened to publish, who has raised this question of can the president and his staff, are they on the same page? And is there a list of unsung heroes? That's the way the anonymous writer put it, or gutless anonymous people, as the White House has put it, trying to thwart the president from inside, this quiet resistance, as they call it. That's what's really shaking up the White House here. And so, yes, they're so worked up about it that the idea of lie detectors has been broached, the idea of these affidavits has been broached. They have a list that they're sort of working on about who they think it might or might not be. And you saw this extraordinary spectacle today of cabinet officer after cabinet officer coming out and saying, it wasn't me, it wasn't me, it wasn't me. But as we all know, that may not be the end of that story.
Peter, it seems, but judging by your reporting tonight, which is extensive about what's going on inside the Trump White House, that you and the New York Times have not lost any access to information inside the Trump White House as a result of the New York Times publishing this op-ed piece.
Well, look, there are obviously people in the White House who are very mad at the New York Times today for publishing that. I get that. Some of them will take that out on reporters. That's natural, too. We had nothing to do with it, of course. The reporters who are covering the White House have nothing to do with the editorial page. We don't even know who this person is. The editorial page doesn't consult us. We learned about it by seeing it on the web just like everybody else. So, I think a lot of people at the White House understand that we're not the same side of the house. We are separate. And I think that a lot of people inside the White House still realize it's important to get information out there, and we're grateful for that.
Donald Trump comprehends the irony of the moment, specifically the irony of the conversation that you and I are having at this very moment, which is that today, with his White House in crisis over people within the White House expressing their dissatisfactions with the Trump administration, that when they have a meeting about that, and when they have a discussion about that, and when they reduce their suspect list to 12, that it is immediately leaked to the New York Times that their suspect list has been reduced to 12.
Yeah, of course, it's also in their interest perhaps to make clear to anybody who might think about doing the same thing as this author that they are going to respond, right? I mean, a White House wants to have discipline. They don't have any discipline, as we see in this White House at the moment. And so they're trying to basically send a signal that this is not going to be tolerated. There will be repercussions for anybody who might think about that. So, you could play it out a couple different ways, but and it's not clear whether this list or the idea of affidavits or lie detectors will go anywhere, but it's an indication of just how, anxious and exercised this White House is, particularly because you've got a president who's raging in volcanic terms about, what he sees as the betrayal of, at least one person and perhaps many people around him.
So, Peter, New York Times reporters are working hard at getting the White House reaction to this New York Times article and what's happening inside the White House because of this New York Times article. It includes a suspect list of 12 people at this point within the White House that Chief of Staff John Kelly apparently has assembled. Does that mean that you New York Times reporters are also trying to go after the answer to the question of who wrote the op-ed piece for the New York Times?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. If I were you, I'd ask the same question. But look, we don't talk about our reporting until we publish. We don't talk about what we're working on until we're ready to say something in print. And so, I'm not going to get into that. I would just repeat that we don't have anything to do with this op-ed, that they are separate departments. And so we had nothing to do with the decision to publish it, and we don't know who the person is from that.
Has the Times put any restrictions on you on what you can investigate about this story?
Well, again, I'm not going to get into what we can, what we're doing or what we're not doing. I mean, that's really the kind of thing we don't do in general. So I don't think I'm going to go there tonight.
Peter Baker, thank you very much for joining us with this breaking news report tonight. We really appreciate it. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.